Stepping up to the couch, it's Brian, who led the league last season in cracked screens. But with his new athletic case, it looks like that won't be the case. Touchdown, Brian!
Before we start, if this video doesn't seem like a normal one, that's because it's not. This one was put together really damn quickly. It was pretty much rushed, because if you follow me on Twitter, you would know that I am working on the Goatmentary, which will be out by the end of the month, finally, but I do need to upload a video on this channel before then so my channel doesn't die. If you're new here and you don't know what the Goatmentary is, it's basically a documentary about the GOAT debate that I have been working on for over a year now. So if you would like to subscribe and wait to see when that comes out, I would really appreciate that. But with that out of the way, I wanted to talk about some players that I thought would be ranked way higher all time had they won a ring or two, or maybe even added to the amount of rings that they won. I know the title doesn't say additional rings, but that's because the title's long enough. There are some guys that I think would be ranked way higher all time had they won 2 or 3 rings rather than just say 1. Or maybe just won a ring on their own as the main guy. Kevin Garnett, for example. He's actually the guy that gave me the idea for this video. I was working on Tim Duncan's section of the Goatmentary, and I had a thought to myself. You know, I don't really think there's anything out there that would suggest that Tim Duncan was really that much better of a player than Kevin Garnett was. Looking at their stats from the age of 22 to 30, KG averaged 22, 12.5 rebounds, 5 assists, and 1.5 steals and blocks. Duncan averaged 22, 12, 3 assists, 1 steal, and 2.5 blocks, and Duncan shot just 1% better. Both were really good scorers. They had the post game, the mid-range game, they were good rim runners. Both were amazing on the defensive end, though I'd probably give Duncan a bit of an edge there. But, I think we could all agree that talent-wise, it's pretty damn close. I'd give Duncan a slight edge as far as talent over Kevin Garnett, but I think most people would agree that talent-wise, they were nearly identical. But Duncan is obviously ranked way higher on all-time lists, and that is because talent and greatness are not the same thing. Of course, you have to have a lot of talent to be high up on all-time lists. It's not like Robert Horry is in people's top 20 players of all time just because he has 7 rings. But rings as well as legendary moments, individual accomplishments like MVPs, and other shit like that, all builds up to being ranked higher than someone who might be on the same level of talent. Let's say you put Kevin Garnett on the San Antonio Spurs and Duncan on the Timberwolves. I think Duncan ends up being the guy that's traded to the Celtics and only wins 1, and KG is the one that has 5 rings. It all comes down to their situations. All things considered, Garnett had the talent of a top 10 player of all time, but isn't even ranked in the top 15 and certainly not the top 10, like Duncan is to most people. So let's go with a few more examples of this. Players who had the talent of top 10 to top 15 players of all time that just never got there because they didn't have the accomplishments to show for it.
Under 3 to play in the third. Sparking and dropping. It's off Cantor. And the Knicks need a time.
Now, I made a tweet asking for people to tell me some players that they thought would be ranked way higher with more rings, and the name that I got the most easily was Allen Iverson. Allen really never had any kind of offensive help on his teams, so he was really damn inefficient. Shooting 42, 31, 77 on 51% true shooting percentage for his career in Philly. But that's because he didn't really have anyone on his team that could help him on the offensive end. Jerry Stackhouse for just his rookie year, and 75 games of an injured old Chris Webber were the only 2 20-point scorers he ever played with. He also had no kind of shooters around him besides for one here or there. The defense only had one guy that they really had to worry about, so teams could just take their best perimeter defender, replace him on Allen Iverson, and help off of his teammates who couldn't shoot or create off the dribble. There isn't a world where AI was going to be efficient in that situation. But as soon as he was traded to the Denver Nuggets, a team with Carmelo Anthony and some spacing, he shot 45% from the field and 35% from three, far more respectable numbers. So if the answer was given a teammate that he could defer to as a scorer, say he had Chris Webber in his prime, not an old and injured Chris Webber, as well as some shooters that the defense doesn't leave open, I think there's a good chance he wins a ring or two. And considering AI's swagger and his flash and his talent, he's going to be ranked way higher all time with a couple of rings. Right now, I'd say he's probably ranked in between 20 and 30 all time, probably closer to 30, but I think he's on the edge of top 15, maybe even top 15 had he won a ring or two. Next, we have Patrick Ewing, and for the people that never watched him play, including myself, I'd like to put his talent into perspective by talking about Joel Embiid, which I know sounds weird. But no doubt the guy that most people compare Embiid to as a player is Hakeem Olajuwon. But I think size-wise, his profile is very comparable to Patrick Ewing. Both are also amazing shot blockers. Ewing, for his career, averages 2.4 blocks, and in his best season in 1990, he put up 28, 11, and 4 blocks on 55% shooting. And Ewing was also no slouch in the post. He might not have used as much finesse as Hakeem, but his size and touch allowed him to dominate down low. So there are a lot of times when I'm watching Joel Embiid play where I get more of a Patrick Ewing vibe than a Hakeem Olajuwon one. He was one of the best centers of the 90s, but unfortunately having his prime in the 90s in the Eastern Conference was pretty bad for him, being that MJ was there. He found himself running into the Bulls over and over again in the playoffs, which resulted in him being ringless. Had he won a ring or two, I think he would be viewed as a borderline top 5 center, being ranked over guys like David Robinson and Moses Malone. Next, we have Charles Barkley, who I feel is one of the most underrated players in NBA history. I don't think a lot of people understand just how good of a player Charles Barkley was. In his best statistical season, he averaged 28 and 12 on 59% shooting, and he also averaged 14.6 rebounds in 87, despite being a 6'6" power forward. He was a ridiculously good rebounder and unstoppable post player, so much so that the NBA had to instill the 5-second back to the basket rule, because if basketball was just like 2K, Charles Barkley in the post was basically the biggest cheese. So like every other BS exploit in 2K, the Sixers and Suns would spam that cheese. If you would like to hear more about Barkley and why I feel he's overrated, Legend of Winning made a great video about him, which I would highly recommend. Barkley's best shot to win a championship came in 1993 with the Phoenix Suns, who had Dan Marley and Kevin Johnson as his star teammates, as well as some good role players. Not a great supporting cast, but a good one. They faced Jordan's Bulls in the finals, only unlike Ewing, it wasn't a foregone conclusion that Barkley would be losing to Jordan. Barkley averaged 27, 13, and 5.5 assists. In Game 6, the Suns were up 2 with 30 seconds remaining. Dan Marley, who was one of the better shooters of his era, airballed a wide-open mid-range shot, which led to the Bulls getting possession, and Danny Ainge leaving John Paxson wide open from 3. So losing Game 6 was not Charles Barkley's fault, his team just fumbled it at the end. Let's say Marley hits that shot and the Suns win Game 6, and then proceed to win Game 7 on the Bulls' home court. Think of what kind of legacy that would leave for Barkley. He would be on a team with lesser talent than MJ, but he still would have won, being the only player to take down MJ on the biggest stage. He would be known as the guy who took down a prime Michael Jordan. That ring would have had an impact on his legacy far bigger than 2016 was for LeBron James. I could easily see Barkley being slotted in at the top 15 with a ring that was that impactful. And for a few more guys, Tracy McGrady, I think Steve Nash and John Stockton don't get much respect because they never won a ring. Kevin Durant winning rings that people actually respect should help if it does happen. Dirk, if he won a few more. Vince Carter, CP3 probably won't win one, unfortunately. Dwight Howard gets crazy disrespect these days, but a ring in his prime would have been awesome for his legacy. Carmelo Anthony for sure. Westbrook would catch a lot less heat from me and other critics if he won one. Jerry West could have had a Bill Russell level legacy if he had won like 6 or 7 rings out of 9 finals appearances instead of 1. And there's also Karl Malone, but as you should know, I'm glad that piece of shit never won a ring. That's the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.